Welcome back, everybody, live at Drew's house, another edition. Hope everybody's doing okay. Very excited about our guest today. And I should say, hope everybody's having a good March and staying healthy and all that stuff. But my guest today, an old friend of mine, you probably remember him from WBZ TV. He's moved on to his alma mater at Bridgewater State, doing all sorts of fun things. We'll talk about that. The one and only Dave Robichaud. How are you, sir?
Good, my brother. Good to see you.
Looking good. It's been weird. We haven't gone to a concert. I haven't seen you in ages.
I know. There was a time where you and we had this relationship where we saw each other and bonded at work, or we saw each other at concerts. And allow me, if I might, that's one of my favorite pictures of us right there. Was that Tom Petty or Bruce? I can't remember. It was.
I believe that was Tom Petty at the Boston Garden.
Yes, and I have my inflatable guitar, and man, I've told you this many times, you're the ultimate concert partner for me, because you jam, you sing, you put your heart out there, and that's what everybody should do at a concert, I think. And we have gone to many together, haven't we?
We certainly have. That's very sweet of you to say. Thank you. It was right back at you, by the way. Why don't we just start there then? You got the Springsteen shirt on. There you go. Good for you.
Yeah, I think this is the Darkness Tour or the River Tour. Could be either one, really.
When I first was brought into the WBZ newsroom back when we were together at all in the same newsroom, TV and radio, I forget who it was, but I was told that I must go speak to you. And I believe that's how our friendship was built. It started with a Bruce reference, and that was it.
Yes. Another producer said, "Oh, you love Springsteen. You need to go talk to Roby." They said that to you, right? And then boom, we just bonded immediately.
That was great. Too funny. So how's life, man? You're at Bridgewater State now.
Yes, I am. My alma mater. So it's really come full circle, because when I graduated from Bridgewater in 1983, I did my internship at Channel 4 at WBZ. And that's how I got started in my news career, 30-something year news career. And now I'm back working there, basically doing the same thing, telling the stories of Bridgewater State University, a place I love, near and dear to my heart. And like I say, no one gets killed, no one dies, nothing horrible happens like my old business covering stories like that. It's all good.
Yeah, fantastic. It must be crazy in a pandemic, though. What a time to be in that college life.
Yeah, so essentially what I do is I run the news division, if you look at it that way. I have a long, convoluted title, Assistant Vice President of Content Strategy and Development. But what I really do is run the news division, our writers, our videographers, our social media. I oversee that, and I run the editorial meetings, and we tell the stories of Bridgewater State. So last March or whatever, all the stories we were telling really were stories of the pandemic. But there weren't negative stories. There were stories about how our alumni, how our students, how our faculty were overcoming the pandemic and still doing their jobs. And then we shifted into putting out the messaging about what's it going to be like to come back in the fall of then 2020, right? The safe returns. We're making videos about that. So it's been crazy. I mostly work from home here in the basement. But I've gone down to campus several times to shoot videos. If we got to go shoot and produce a video, I go down to campus. So.
Very cool. So how have the kids adjusted, do you think? Is it a college experience still? What would give you a little insight on that?
Well, I was surprised that I think we had 1,200 some odd kids still living on campus in the dorms, even though they knew that most of their classes had shifted online. But I think they were trying in this pandemic, as all of us are, trying to normalize their lives as much as possible. So if they could be with their friends on campus rather than be at home trapped with, the bratty little sister or the nagging parents or whatever, that's what they chose to do. So it wasn't a full experience. Like, none of us are living a full experience right now, but I think those who chose to live on campus are making the best of it, and they're still developing friendships and relationships, albeit with masks on most of the time, right? So, it's not the thriving, bustling campus that I'm used to, but fingers crossed for the fall, right? We're planning on coming back to a normal experience in the fall. That's what we're planning for, but we'll have to see what state and federal regulations say that, right?
Gotcha. Does this mean we can call you Professor Dave Robichaud?
You know what? It's funny because when I first got this job, my old Bridgewater friends were, texting me photos of like Donald Sutherland from Animal House and, Indiana Jones, college professor or whatever. I'm not a professor per se. I'm an assistant vice president, but in marketing and communications, but I do a fair amount of teaching because we hire student workers, student videographers, student content producers. And so there's really a lot of teaching involved. And there's a lot of teaching involved with the people who I work with. I mean, I can bring almost 40 years of experience and knowledge in the news business into my current gig where I'm working with a lot of young people. So I think that counts.
And rule number 1, always put your Emmys in the Zoom shot. Excellent work.
Yeah. Those are only 2 of them. The rest are in the storage room.
I was thinking of you the other day because I remember you telling me a story, and it just so happens he's in the news this week, of how it was a nice honor for you to have Dale Arnold introduce you and give you one of those Emmys and brought you up on stage, I remember. And he obviously said goodbye to the business. Talk about that moment. I know that was a cool moment for you.
Yeah, when you're coming up in the news business, you have certain people you admire. I had many at Channel 4, but unfortunately, a lot of them have passed. John Henning, Charlie Austin was a great mentor of mine. And I never worked with Dale Arnold, but I certainly listened to Dale Arnold. And he's a lot like Dan Roach.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are just, they're rare because they're not cynical guys. They're not hateful guys. They're on, like in Danny's case, he's a broadcaster, but in Dale's case, he's on sports radio, which is, you almost have to be half a shock jock, but he never went that way. He remained true to himself, which is a gentleman, nice guy, humanitarian, dignified. And I really admired him. So when I won my first Emmy, I think, he presented it to me. He had, at the Emmy ceremony, he was the one presenting that category, which was, I think, best feature reporter or something. Mm-hmm. And I remember going up and shaking his hand and saying, "This means a lot getting this from you." So I know he's been bombarded with a lot of messages over the last 48 hours or whatever, but I am going to reach out to him and remind him of that because he's one of the true good guys, like a Ted Lasso kind of guy.
Yeah. Yep.
He really is. Yeah, I really admire him.
I just started watching that the other night, actually. So that I will get
great show
even more as we get going. So
yeah, that's such a great show. I love it.
Well, yes. Good luck to Dale as he goes. But yeah, it's a tough business to make it in the sports talk business. How about as you look back on the TV career? How many years ago was it now you left?
It'll be 3 in August, I think. Will be my 3rd anniversary. Yeah.
You probably expected.
I think it was 18. I got out in 18. Yeah, I left in 2018. I think. Yeah.
Do you miss it?
No. Wait, should I have paused longer? But I want to be clear about something. Boston.com did a great article when I left. It was very thoughtful. And the headline was something like, I won't be taking ghosts home with me every night anymore, something like that. And she really nailed it because at that point of my career, I wasn't doing many feature stories anymore. It was all what I call Murder Incorporated, which as Springsteen fans, that song reference. There was too much, okay, call in, okay, listen, 3 people were killed in a fire in Somerville, head right there. And then the next day is 80-year-old man get mowed down in a crosswalk, go get reaction from his family. Or, hey, 2 girls were killed on prom night in a DUI crash, go knock on the door and talk to the parents. Can I swear on the show or no? Should I not?
Yeah, whatever.
No, I won't. I'm tempted to. There was too much of that for me, and it does have a cumulative effect. I mean, I remember I spent 8 days at Ground Zero, and that was, I'm not, saying, oh, whoa, it's all about me. I mean, 3,000 something people died, but that was a very emotionally draining experience. And I remember every night they had the Red Cross had these tents set up where they had counseling sessions that you could go to. And I just took advantage of that. You know, you needed to, like after a 17-hour day, where like I remember in the first few days, remember people were walking around with like wanted posters. Have you seen my husband? He was on the 80th floor. Have you maybe seen him stumbling around or whatever? And your heart's breaking because you know, oh, there's a very small chance that that woman's husband is stumbling around or in an emergency room or something like that. But we would make a story out of that. And then, you know, what do you do with that? Like, what do you do with that emotion later? So that was happening way too much. You know, it was getting to the point where I was coming home every night and, you know me, I'm the type of guy that I'm not, you know, they say don't get emotionally involved in your stories, right? That's impossible. Anybody who says, any journalist who says they can do that, they don't really have a soul, I think, as far as I'm concerned. So I would bring home every night whatever tragedy I was covering that day. And it's hard to shake. It was hard to shake. And so I don't know what the last straw was for me. I don't think there was a last straw per se. Like some people say, okay, when I covered that fatal bus accident, that was it. I'm out of here. It was just the cumulative effect of it. And so what had happened was every year I'd go to Bridgewater State homecoming, and I'm kind of like the de facto celebrity there, right? Like the TV guy. So I'd be at homecoming. Everybody wants to take selfies with me. You know, the president of the college, who was a classmate of mine, is looking at me and going, what a great ambassador this guy is for Bridgewater State, because I became I've been involved with my university for 40 years. You know, ever since I graduated, I've been heavily involved in speaking at convocation, doing fundraiser, all that stuff. So he, you know, sort of said to me one day, it would be great to get you to work here someday. And I remember saying, well, keep that in mind and let's talk at some point, because that might happen. Mm-hmm. And it happened. And it happened. And, you know, if you're lucky enough to go somewhere, work somewhere that you're passionate about, you know, like I met all my best friends at Bridgewater State. I had my internship there that led to my career. That's how I got involved in radio. I was on the radio station. I broadcast, like you and I are so similar, because I did play-by-play for college basketball with men's and women's. Mm-hmm. And I wrote it for the newspaper and everything. And that 4 years at Bridgewater made me really who I am today. So to have an opportunity to go back and work there, and my office overlooks the quad where I played touch football, frisbee, made out on blankets, might have smoked a doobie or two. You know, it means so much to me. And to look out my office window and my senior dorm is right across, and it just feels like home to me. You know? It feels great.
That's cool. It strikes me too that when you were talking about leaving the business, it's a lot of those crime stories. Those are the ones that kind of wear on you. You had that whole other feature though, that kind of that was feature stories. It was your deal and kind of more fun stuff. And that really, I feel like you missed that when that went away. Is that fair to say?
Two of the Emmys that you see behind me are from the TV 38 morning show, the UPN 38 morning show. Mm-hmm. The greatest gig I ever had. They started the show on our sister station, TV 38. And I did a segment called Roby on the Road.
Yeah.
And it was basically me unleashed. So, I mean, I have a background in stand-up comedy, improvisational comedy. And I just channeled all that stuff into, it was flying by the sheet. I was live at the circus. I'm live in a hot air balloon. I wrestled a WWF female wrestler. There's like crazy stuff like that, but it really fed into, and then told very heartwarming stories as well, all feature stories. And I loved it. And that filled my soul. I did a kid show on WBZ radio called Kid Company. It was the only radio show for kids. And we won a Peabody Award. Josh Binswanger, my dear friend and co-host, we won a Peabody Award for that. And I was the game show guy on that show. So I was fortunate enough to do, and I host the Phantom Gourmet, right? That was a great gig. I did that for 2 years. That took me from relatively known person to every time I went to a concert at the Garden, hey, it's the Phantom Gourmet guy, Roby, whatever, you know, Great Woods, wherever I was, Red Sox game, people would come up to me and they knew me more as the Phantom Gourmet host than they did news guy. And then the Roby on the Road thing took off. And then that show went away and I went back to Murder Incorporated. So that's what happened there.
Murder Incorporated. I hear you. Well, so again, we're joined by Dave Robichaud here, joining us from his home. He's at Bridgewater State now after a storied career, WBZ TV, and he's behind him and all. There's got to be, I know you don't miss the crime part about it. I know you don't miss so many of those stories. And you probably don't miss getting up at whatever hour you were getting up back in the day. What do you miss, though? I can imagine there's some of that newsroom camaraderie that does leave an empty space for you.
It's very similar to when they ask a professional athlete, what do you miss the most? And they'll say, I miss my teammates, right? Yeah, definitely. I miss the camaraderie with the photographers. Like, that's the special bond. I don't know what it's like to be a police officer, for instance, right? But when you're in a car with someone for 12, 13 hours a day, doing a story out of a car, and you're going to tragedies with them or telling heartwarming stories, there's a bond that develops there. So you don't really have a similar bond with your fellow reporters because they're off covering different stories. But the photographers and the editors, you develop friendships and relationships there. And I really miss that. I still keep in touch with a bunch of them, but I would say that's the part I miss the most. Several people have asked me over the last couple of years, don't you miss the kind of being famous part? Like, don't you miss, people coming up to you at a Springsteen show or Red Sox game or Patriots game, whatever? And I never really, honestly, I never really cared too much for that, except for people, total strangers are calling me Roby. Like, my wife would crack up at this. We'd be out somewhere and they'd be like, Roby. So there's that moment where did I go to college with this person? Did I used to work with this person? Whatever. And then it turns out they're a total stranger. Yeah. And I guess the best part about that is a lot of people said this to me after, let's say we're at the Garden, it's before a show. I'm striking up a conversation with the fans behind me because they know me from TV. And they'd always say, you know what? You're exactly the same guy in real life as you are on TV. And that's really not the goal, right? It's not an act or anything, but that meant a lot to me, that people felt comfortable enough to call me by my nickname, and I'm a total stranger to them, but they could tell by something I did or said on television that they knew I was approachable in an authentic way, like in an honest way. Yeah. And I really like that. I do miss, by the way, when you ask me, do you miss it? And I go, no, that's Murder Incorporated, right? True. You can relate to this. The Red Sox championships, the Patriots championships, the celebratory things. I used to be live during the 4th of July celebration. That was a blast. 4th of July, New Year's Eve, the Boston Marathon was one of my favorite days because they'd throw me on a wireless mic in the middle of a crowd, or I'd run up Heartbreak Hill. I tried to interview Will Ferrell one time. We knew he was in the race and he was shooting Anchorman 1. And so we had spotters along the way, and they're like, we got a Will Ferrell sighting. He's at the bottom of Heartbreak Hill. So they're in my ear. All right, we're coming out of commercial break. We're going to go right to you, try to find Will Ferrell. So I saw him. So I ran 200 yards down the hill. We're wireless. I'm running up the hill. He's got the mustache and the headband and stuff. And I'm peppering him with questions. And he's looking straight ahead. And he had a bodyguard or something next to him. And the guy finally goes, can't you take a hint? And he pushed me out of frame on the TV. And then one time during the marathon, we had a live marriage proposal. And these people came up to me along the route at Heartbreak Hill and they go, oh my God. All right, we have to tell you something. So my friend is running in the race. He has the engagement ring attached to his shoelace. His girlfriend's right over there. And he's going to stop right here and propose to her. I'm like, awesome. So I call, hey, you guys got to come to me, about when this happens. So they come to me. The runner comes over. The girlfriend's right there. She's like, what's going on? He leans down. He takes off the ring, and he, gets on one knee and he goes, Molly, whatever, will you marry me? She didn't answer him. So she's like, Brian, I don't really think this is the place to do this or whatever. It wasn't like you see on the Jumbotron at the Sox game or whatever, or at a concert, like it happens. It was so awkward. So I had to toss back to Bob Lobel. And he's like, what happened there? And I go, I guess this really is Heartbreak Hill. You know, that's the only line I can think of at the time. And that was one of those rare moments, you know?
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So that's where you thrive. I've always thought was your strength, is your strength. I mean, people who watch you on TV are like, that guy, he's like that, isn't he? That's that guy. You're really seeing the real guy on TV. And it's true.
Yeah, listen, that's not to say I couldn't cover serious stories. I did. You know, I went to Kosovo, you know, to cover the Serbian refugee camps. I got nominated for an Emmy for that. My Ground Zero stuff, politics. I could do everything. I just didn't love those stories, you know.
What is that feeling, by the way? One more serious note before I have some fun with you here to end. When you're driving down to New York City, a place you've been a million times, great city to visit, great city to go see shows in, all that stuff. But when you know the world has changed for 9/11, like what's that drive? Did you drive, I take it? What's the drive down to New York City like?
Well, so what happened was on the day of, I was working the night shift, and I was home, and my sister called and said, turn on the Today Show, turn on the Today Show. So I did, found out from Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel, I think, what was going on. So I'm like, okay, my phone's going to ring. It did. What happened was, if you remember, one of the pilots, I think it was of Flight 11, was from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And, you know, several hours after this happened, we knew who he was. So they sent me right from my house to, I believe it was Drake. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but lived on a farm. So I went to the Oganowski residence, and I pull up, and it's like semi-deserted. I'm the only one here. I go, well, this can't be right because there's no media here. And I went up and knocked on the door, and his brother answered the door. And I'm by myself. I'm not with a photographer. And I identified myself. He was very nice. He goes, I'm sorry, you can't bother the family right now and all that stuff. And so he came outside. I go, I'm so sorry to have to be here, but I go, within an hour, maybe 2 hours, this entire road, your whole farm is going to be satellite trucks. That's what's going to happen. And he goes, what can I do? And I said, if you have a picture of your brother, like preferably in uniform, like in United Air uniform, and a spokesperson, someone who can come out and talk, then I think people will go away, right? And that's what he did. He goes, okay. And then I didn't like playing this role, but then I went down to the end of the driveway, and as CNN rolled up, NBC rolled up, international media, like satellite trucks from everywhere, I became the person that said, okay, here's the deal. The brother's going to come out and talk. Here's the picture. He gave me the picture. So we put it on, it's like somebody set up a mic stand, and we put the picture on the mic stand so they could shoot it. And then everybody set their microphones up. And then I became like this, you know, accidental producer / coordinator. And when the brother came out and spoke. So anyway, then I was there, you know, all night. And then they called me and said, one of my colleagues had been on the way to New York City to go to Ground Zero. And she found out a relative had been killed on one of the flights on the way down. So she obviously turned around and came back, and they said, you got to go, me. So remember, there's no planes, there's no trains, there's no buses, because they shut down everything because we didn't know what was going on. America's under attack, right? It was a scary, scary, scary time. So you're asking me how I felt? I felt scared. And they go, we're sending a limo to your house to pick you up because you got to drive there because there's no other way to get you there. And it was like, it wasn't a limo. It was like a LTD or something. And I had that 5-6 hour ride or whatever. And then I got dropped off a couple of miles away. I had to walk for quite a distance. And then that began 8 days of, it was awful. I remember one point, when they let us, after a couple of days, I guess, they let us get fairly close to an area, or I think it was around Battery Park, that had been cordoned off. They were letting some residents into their buildings to get their pets. So imagine you got evacuated, or this happened, and you were out of your house and you couldn't get to your house, and your dog, like you're a dog lover like me, your dog's in the house for 2 days, can't get to your dogs or your cats. So they were letting people in to do that. So we're at a police line with my photographer, and we see a firefighter coming out of an apartment, comforting this woman, like holding her. She's like sobbing. And he's saying to us, like he's pointing at us, like, don't shoot this, you know, point your cameras away from us. And then she got into a car or something. And then I said, what happened? She had gone into her apartment. Now this is like several blocks from the towers. And there was an airline seat with a corpse in her apartment that had gone through the window.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it was like, what? So it was stuff like that. I mean, it looked like, some parts of it looked like you couldn't tell there was a car because there was this much dust. Like it was just total, the streets and all the cars were covered. Like if it snowed gray, that's what it looked like. And then it looked like they had a ticker tape parade, but it was confetti because when the building blows up, you know, all the paper just, you know, goes everywhere. It was, yeah.
Yes.
I haven't thought about that in a long time, but yeah, it was pretty bad.
Sights you never hope to see again, obviously.
Yeah, but you know, your original question was, how did you feel going down there? And I think, you know, scared, and then and also you feel like an intruder, right? You know, any story, any mass tragedy, you know, in my old business and your current business, you get criticized a lot for, what'd you do? Say, how do you feel? What'd you do? Say, you know, no, you don't do that, but you got to tell the story, right? In the most sensitive way, empathetic way, you know, that you can.
Fascinating stuff. Again, Dave Robichaud here. Fast forward a couple decades later, you go down to a Springsteen show in New York City that gets canceled, running around in a snowstorm.
Yeah, that had never happened before. My buddy, let me get a picture. Hang on, I'll step out of frame for a second. So this is a mutual friend of ours.
Yep.
John Joyce, JJ. There's Bruce right there. There's us. We're in the pit.
Yep.
I don't know, what year was that? 2014 or something? Yeah, we go down to the Bruce show and it's a snowstorm, Madison Square Garden, and they cancel the show, which we're major league heartbroken. We couldn't imagine they would ever do that, but he was concerned that fans from Jersey couldn't get there. You know, the roads were blocked off, whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we made the best of it. But New York City was like shut down. It was shut down.
Absolutely.
But we went back. The makeup show was great. That was the makeup show.
That is fantastic. All right, let's do a little. We always end with some fun music stuff. So I'm going to keep this mostly music centric. Favorite Springsteen album?
Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Yeah, I knew the answer.
So it's close. But you and I have talked about Tunnel of Love, so it's very close.
I do have a soft spot for Tunnel. I love Tunnel of Love.
Tunnel is his best lyrically might be his best album, in my opinion.
Best show that was not a Bruce show.
Wow, that's tough because I've had many. Well, it would have to be a Petty show. One of the many Petty shows I saw at Great Woods. But I'm going to go with Petty Hartford. I think it was the last time I saw him before he passed. We were in the third row right in front of Mike Campbell. It was spectacular. It was great. I had my inflatable guitar. It was wonderful.
I remember walking around with you. We didn't go to that show together, but we spent some time beforehand. And I remember walking around with you, and the amount of people that recognized you with that air guitar was absolutely priceless. Great photos, as you said, of that night. What's the album? Is it Darkness that you go back to the most? What's like the album that you listen to like today the most?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's Darkness because, remember, I'm a lot older than you. We joke around. We're like really, really good friends, but I'm your father's age, like exactly your father's age. And when I was in college, I knew one person with a tape deck in his car. Like a tape deck was a huge thing. Yeah. Wait a minute, you can listen to music in your car, like an album? That was unheard of. So I borrowed his car and I had the Darkness cassette. And then I was dating a woman at Colby College, and then I listened to that album all the way there and all the way back. That album is always kind of playing in my head. Darkness on the Edge of Town.
I just did this story. I had to ask a bunch of kids what they thought about the cassette because the inventor of the cassette just passed away. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, and Lou Ottens was his name. And, all these 20-year-olds, you think about it, because I'm, 34, I didn't really do too much cassette work myself. I mean, I remember them, but I wasn't like in huge music listening. Like I kind of missed it myself. So if you picture a 20-year-old, they have no idea what you're talking about when you ask them, the pencil trick and, stuff like that about, getting the tape free.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Drew, I'm staring at my Sony boombox from 1984 right now. It's on the shelf over there. It's yellow.
It's a
cassette deck.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. Hey, what's the best parade you ever covered? Was it the first Red Sox one? What was the deal?
Oh, you're never going to be able to top the first Red Sox parade. How could you? It's like whoever wins the first championship after the pandemic, right? It's this giant exhale. It's generations of Red Sox fans finally letting it rip. There was nothing like it. That was incredible. Yeah.
Who's the best interview? Like the guy or the woman who you were like, wow, that was like surprisingly, like I would not have pictured that person being that way.
The most charismatic person I've ever met in my life. I think it was the Copley Plaza Hotel. I'm going to say it. I don't know the year. I'm terrible at this, but early 90s, mid 90s. He comes out of his suite ready to be interviewed. He knew the names of every bellhop, every chambermaid at the hotel. He was going up. How do you do that? We hadn't been introduced to him before the interview. He was calling us by our first names. William Jefferson Clinton.
Wow.
Brilliant, charismatic, magnetic. Straight, looked you right in the eye. You can be cynical if you want. I thought he was truthful. I think he was truthful. Yeah. So yeah, I would say Bill Clinton.
You comfortable telling me the worst?
The worst?
Worst interview you ever had?
Yeah, Cyndi Lauper.
Time after time.
Total. I don't even know how to describe it. She said her makeup person was late, so she wouldn't go on camera. You can only do my voice. You can only interview me by my voice, not my face. And then it was awful after that. So yeah. See how quickly that came to me? I haven't thought of that in a long time. Yeah. Now that's an example of like a celebrity. There's been plenty of interviews with like scumbags that were worse than, the perp walk, you're chasing somebody, that kind of thing. Plenty of those.
Favorite concert venue, theater, outside, whatever. What's the favorite venue, place to go to?
Well, there's a lot of them, but I love the Lowell Folk Festival, whatever that's called, that venue, because I've been 15 feet from Jacob Dylan of the Counting Crows. I've been 10 feet from Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes. Yeah, so Wallflowers, Dawes, I've seen how can you possibly beat that? You're sitting on a blanket 15 feet from your favorite artist. That's phenomenal. But after that, I love Great Woods. I still call it Great Woods. I don't know what the hell they call it now. It was the Tweeda Center for a while. It's like Xfinity or whatever. I still call it the Garden.
Yeah, I have a soft.
It's always the Garden.
I have a soft spot for Mansfield too. I don't think it's the best venue to see a show. It's fine, but I just have great memories there. I think that's what it is. I just so many shows in the summertime. And
well, what makes it great is, think about it. It's really the only tailgating. Well, Gillette, you can tailgate at Gillette. I'll correct myself there, but it's a great place to tailgate. And depending on your seats, you're right. I would never sit on the lawn. I never have. But if you can be in the first, 20 rows or something, it's fantastic. You're outside, hot summer night, And
then you get to tailgate on the back end because it takes you 2.5 hours to get out of there.
Exactly. Right.
Favorites. Who's the person that, and you may have mentioned them earlier. I know you went through a few of your idols, but who was the person that left the biggest impact on you as a news reporter? Who was the person you really looked up to and admired the most in the business?
Wow. I got to go back to Charlie Austin because I worked with him as an assignment editor, like I was essentially his boss, and I watched him and learned from him. What a dignified, classy man, spiritual man he was. And then when I became a reporter, he immediately took on the mentor role. There were some other veteran reporters that didn't give me the time of day because they didn't think they thought I hadn't earned it. I hadn't gone to work in Podunk or, Hartford or whatever. But he always would say to me, "Hey, come here, kid. Listen, I wouldn't have done that, or good job on that." He was just, and my desk was right next to him. My cubicle was right next to him. So he gave me a lot of positive feedback. But, kind of like in the Dale Arnold, Dan Roach mode, just a gentleman. That's very rare to find somebody that doesn't put on any airs. They're not looking to impress anybody. Mm-hmm. That's the way they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when he passed away. I remember that hit you pretty hard. I remember I happened to be having a conversation with you around that time, and I remember. I'm not surprised by that answer out of you. What is the advice for the young journalist? Because I know you're teaching news these days. What's the number one thing you want people to walk away from? Walk away with, I should say.
Well, I guess, what's the humanity in every story, right? What's that? What's the center? What's the truth of every story? There's too many posers out there. I don't watch the news a lot now, but what I see, I don't really love it. People are performers now, it's all about the selfie. If I didn't really do a lot of selfies, but I'm watching these journalists. Here's me with my Dunkin' latte. Here's me with my dog or whatever. Where's you at the freaking scene of the story? Where are you telling the story? Tell me the story. What's the center of the story? What's the humanity? What's the human interest of it? Why should I care? Right? So it's not about you, it's about find the story, find the center of the story, find the humanity of the story. That's what I always try to do. So I would say that. And you got to be a jack of all trades now. You got to know how to do everything, right?
Well, you did it well. You have a beard now, I notice. I think a lot of people are saying that's a good look for you.
Well, my kids always said vacation dad always had a beard, and I did. So now I'm permanent, kind of like permanent vacation dad, Yeah. I don't think I'll ever shave. They wrote it into my contract, my last contract. There was an amendment that they added, an addendum, whatever, to my contract that says cannot have facial hair. It was in my contract. So part of me is like defiant, it's like nobody can tell me how to look now,
Some manager in the background going, he's a loose cannon with this beard. I'm telling you, we got to have some writing.
Yeah, I mean, this is closer to me, how I am right now. Concert Roby is also a persona I have, which you know very well. But I think Concert Roby is always Roby. That's just me. Like, I'm the same I am at a concert. I'm just a little more amped up,
Yeah. One of my favorite concert moments with you, we'll end with a good little Springsteen moment. I always say this. You may know what I'm going to say before I even say it, but you and I went to Hartford for a show. And there's a moment where during, I guess it was the Promised Land maybe, or Land of Hope and Dreams. It's one of those two. And we weren't even that close. We had decent seats, but we were at like probably center ice from the stage, 10 rows back. And we're jumping around like maniacs. And Bruce from it has to be 50 yards away, spots us in the crowd and starts fist pumping towards us, going, yeah. And it was clearly at us jumping around. Yeah. People came up to us after the show and they were like, that was very cool. He spotted you guys. You guys are my favorite fans of the day.
Well, it's like Steve Van Zandt, his longtime friend, sidekick guitarist, said, the Europeans are participants in a show. Most Americans are observers. You and I are participants. When I go to a show, I participate. I sing. I air guitar. I fist bump. I cry. I laugh. It drives me nuts when people sit down the whole time or they're checking their emails. Go home. the one thing I don't miss about concerts is those posers, fakers. Like, you're taking up a seat from someone like me who wants to be here and enjoy it. Stay home. Wait for the DVD.
That's fantastic, man. I can't wait to go to another show with you. I miss seeing you in person. I miss going to concerts with you, and I hope the family's doing well and all that. We'll see you on the other side of this.
Yeah, I miss you too, and keep up the great work. I'm very, very proud of you and what you're becoming. I love it.
What am I becoming?
You're becoming
I'm not sure I want you to answer that.
Multimedia star. Your career is very much like mine. You were a behind the scenes guy for a long time, and now you're out in front, and people get to see what you're like. Your creativity, your humanity, your humor, your insightfulness. That's great. Keep it going.
Just a guy in his kitchen, Roby.
You're much more than that.
I miss you, man. We'll see you soon, all right?
Okay, my best to Sarah.